for supporting this fantastic initiative with Leo and Upi there. And as you probably know, the satellite events part of the festival is something that we're really fond of. It's something that we really love because it helps us connect with the wider, the broader Indonesian literary community. So it helps us delve into remote areas. As you know, Indonesia has more than 17,000 islands. So part of our job is to connect with some of these literary communities who are very exciting and vibrant and interested. So, yeah, thank you so much. And tonight we're connecting with the Flores Writers Festival in Flores, Club Buku Ruteng. So thank you, Ada, and thank you to the Flores community. Thank you, Upi, Leo, and everybody else involved in this project. And enjoy tonight's fantastic session. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Ibu Janet. Ya, sayang sekali Leo dari Kedutaan Besar Amerika belum bisa bergabung malam ini. Langsung saja tanpa berpanjang-panjang lagi, sesi kita mulai. Waktu dan tempat saya persilahkan kepada Mbak Erlin. Silakan Mbak Erlin.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Irma. So good evening and good morning. Welcome to the satellite event for today's session. We are welcoming Ada Limon from the US. So good morning, Ada. Okay, my name is Erlin, and for the next 60 minutes, hopefully, I will be kind of hosting this session, and hopefully everyone can enjoy the time. So first of all, thank you for the Ubud Writers and Readers Festival for this amazing chance for us, especially for us from Flores Writers Festival. It's an honor for us to have the intimate session with Ada. So let me introduce briefly about Ada. So she is the author of 6 books of poetry, including The Carrying, which won the National Book Critics Circle Awards for Poetry. So her book, Bright Dead Things, was nominated for the National Book Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. Wow. So her work has been supported most recently by Guggenheim Fellowship. For your information, she grew up in Sonoma, California, and now lives in Lexington, Kentucky, where she writes, teaches remotely, and hosts the critically acclaimed poetry podcast, The Slowdown. So everyone can start subscribe, I think. You will enjoy it a lot. I do. Okay, so based on the information that I got from your website, Ada, your new book of poetry, The Hurting Kind, right, is forthcoming from Milkweed Editions in May 2022. So everyone is welcoming the new book. So hopefully it's as you expected.
Yeah.
All right. All right, guys. So in the webinar session, I also welcoming especially my friends from Klub Buku Petra Ruteng. So Ada, so for your information also, the atmosphere of literacy is increasing. I mean, especially in Flores, and Klub Buku Petra is one of the leading community that started the initiative. So Klub Buku Petra, or Petra Book Community Club, based in Ruteng, the west part of Flores Island. Hopefully you can visit us someday, yeah?
I would love that. I would love that.
Yeah, all right. This community based since 2013, and we just, as a community, we just started to raise up the support, and then the spirit of having the literacy atmosphere around us to share the ideas and also to participate in social events. So the chance that is provided by Flores Writers and Readers Festival this year has been a huge blessing for us. Okay, so without further ado, Ada, would you like to read one of your works to open our sessions?
I would be happy to. And thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here and to be a part of this community and to get to know you all. I really enjoyed the previous session that we had. And I just know how much this is, it feels, I was just asked recently in an article for CNN, and they didn't put this in, but they said, what did I think the future of poetry was going to be? And I said that we are going to become more and more of a global community. Yeah, and then it's going to be more of a global poetry movement as opposed to in these sort of segmented areas. So let me read a poem.
To interpret that?
Oh, yes, Rain.
Okay.
Maybe Ada, Rain will be, have that short interpretation.
Iya, Ada menyampaikan rasa terima kasihnya karena sudah menjadi bagian dari sesi malam ini. Dan dia baru saja mengadakan wawancara bersama CNN, di mana pihak CNN menanyakan Ada, kemana arah masa depan puisi atau dunia puisi atau syair. Dia menyatakan bahwa arahnya adalah terbentuknya sebuah komunitas global, di mana tidak ada segmentasi dari dunia puisi tersebut.
Thank you, Rain. This poem is called The Conditional. I think of it as an apocalyptic love poem.
Okay.
The Conditional. Say tomorrow doesn't come. Say the moon becomes an icy pit. Say the sweet gum tree is petrified. Say the sun's a foul black tire fire. Say the owl's eyes are pinpricks. Say the raccoon's a hot tar stain. Say the shirt's plastic ditch litter. Say the kitchen's a cow's corpse. Say we never get to see it. Bright future, stuck like a bum star, never coming close, never dazzling. Say we never meet her, never him. Say we spend our last moments staring at each other, hands knotted together, clutching the dog, watching the sky burn. Say it doesn't matter. Say that would be enough. Say you'd still want this. Us, alive, right here, feeling lucky.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you, Ada. Your first work invites more people to wait for another reading session. Thank you for that. So it gives me the idea to ask you very first questions, Ada. When did you start your journey in writing and in poems? And maybe would you please share to us how did it start?
Yeah. I first started writing poems when I was quite young, probably 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
And then I started taking it very seriously when I got to undergraduate college at the University of Washington in Seattle.
Okay. Ada memulai menulis puisi ketika masih usia sangat muda, tepatnya di usia antara 8 sampai 9 tahun. Tapi baru mulai serius untuk menggeluti dunia puisi ketika dia duduk di bangku S1 di University of Washington in Seattle.
Thank you, Rain. And then after that, I went to graduate school at New York University in New York City. And I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew is I loved poetry.
Wow.
Dan setelah itu Ada melanjutkan pendidikannya untuk jenjang S2 di New York University di New York. Dan saat itu dia tidak menyadari apa yang dia lakukan, tapi dia sangat mencintai dunia puisi, seni berpuisi.
Thank you, Rain.
Okay. Thank you, Ada. So, as I have ever watched one of your reading session on YouTube last year, 2002, at Tech Shorts, you mentioned that mostly the speakers of your poems is actually yourself.
Yeah.
So how would that be? Yeah.
Yeah, most of you know that when we talk about poems, we say, oh, the speaker of this poem, right? That we don't say it's I.
Yeah.
And for me, when I started writing with the book Bright Dead Things that came out in 2015, it was clear to me that the speaker was always me. So I think it's important to recognize that it also allows me to have some more responsibility on the page, because it is me, and the work is me, and the poem is me. But also that means the people I'm talking about I'm responsible for them too, right?
Okay. Sepertinya sudah sangat jelas bahwa di dunia menulis puisi atau dunia syair, bahwa subjek seperti diri sendiri jarang sekali dibahas. Tapi sejak Ada menulis buku Bright Dead Things yang dipublikasikan di tahun 2015, dia sudah mengetahui bahwa sangat jelas bahwa suara yang ingin dia kemukakan di sini adalah suara dari dirinya sendiri. Dan ini merupakan tanggung jawab tersendiri bagi dia untuk menulis puisi.
Okay.
Thank you, Rain.
Right. So it's really interesting that you say that a writer actually has the responsibility to the readers. So how would you express it in your works? Mostly in this era where informations are like flood everywhere, but you still have that power to touch our hearts through your words. Yeah.
Thank you. I think poetry isn't something that we should hide behind, but rather use it as a tool to connect.
Right.
And too often people want to hide behind art, right? They want to talk about their heart, but in a way that is obfuscated or a way that is unclear, that's cloudy. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's also a tool for communication, to reach out to one another, to connect, to meet each other on the page. And I feel it's really important to recognize that there is power in that, and that connection can help bridge the gap in humanity.
Ya, baik. Saya rasa puisi bukanlah sebuah wadah untuk bersembunyi. Karena puisi bagi Ada adalah sebuah sarana untuk menjalin sebuah relasi atau berkoneksi satu dengan sama lain. Karena Ada berobservasi bahwa kadang orang itu bersembunyi di balik seni atau sebuah karya seni sehingga tidak jelas apa yang ingin dikomunikasikan. Justru Ada merasa bahwa puisi bisa menjadi sebuah sarana untuk bertemu dengan lebih banyak orang, dan juga untuk menjelaskan bahwa ada bagian tersebut di dalam semua orang. Jadi untuk membangun relasi dan berkoneksi dengan satu sama lain.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you, Rain. I still have some lists of questions related to the technicalities of your experience in writing, Ada, because most of our members are also not only readers, but also writers and writers to be, some writers to be. So I believe it will be very helpful for us to hear more on the technicalities that you can share in this session. But before that, I will welcome you to read the next words that you prepare.
I thought I would read a love poem.
Wow. Okay.
And this is a love poem, but it's also about a horse being born.
Yeah, okay.
It's called What I Didn't Know Before. Was how horses simply give birth to other horses. Not a baby by any means, not a creature of liminal spaces, but already a four-legged beast, hell-bent on walking, scrambling after the mother. A horse gives way to another horse, and then suddenly there are two horses, just like that. That's how I loved you. You, off the long train from Red Bank, carrying a coffee as big as your arm, a bag with two computers swinging in it unwieldy at your side. I remember we broke into laughter when we saw each other. What was between us wasn't a fragile thing to be coddled, cooed over. It came out fully formed, ready to run.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You make us happy and sad at once. Oke, Eda. Teman-teman mungkin bisa mempersiapkan pertanyaan. Saya bisa bantu untuk nanti mentranslate ke Eda. Kalau teman-teman punya pertanyaan, nanti kita akan mulai berbicara tentang hal-hal teknis bagaimana mulai menulis puisi dengan baik. Alright, Ada. So I was telling them to prepare the questions and raise up their questions if they are ready. So what is interesting in your poems are the symbol that you used. Horse seems that's very special. How about that? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm often asked about horses in my poems, and people ask what the metaphor is. Mm-hmm. But I also want to be clear that I live in bluegrass country, and so there are horses everywhere. So the horses are a metaphor, but they're also the real animal, right? That is around here. Right. But for me, when I look at animals, I try to remember that the most important thing for me is to try to remember that I am an animal too.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Seringkali Ida mendapat pertanyaan kenapa kuda, apa metafora di balik kuda tersebut. Tapi sesungguhnya ide ini datang dari tempat tinggal Ida sendiri, karena Ida tinggal di daerah yang terdapat banyak kuda. Karena dia tinggal di Lexington. Tapi dia juga menambahkan bahwa kuda ini adalah hewan yang nyata, dan dari situ dia membuat sebuah relasi di mana kita manusia, saya, dia adalah juga bagian dari binatang.
Thank you, Rain.
So what is Ada saying is actually we can expose ourselves to be honest in our works, as well as to introduce where we are from, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you, Ada. Okay, so we have some questions here on the chat. The first one from Wildy Ahmad, Ada. The question is, who is the person that motivates you for being a poet?
I think it was probably my family. So it was a unit. My mother is a painter. My stepfather is a writer. My father is an educator. And my stepmother, before she passed, was also an educator. And so I think I was really influenced by all of them, the people who were in education and the people that were the artists. And they gave me permission to explore creativity without the guilt or fear that many people have when they're trying to do something creative as a life instead of the responsible career choices.
Ya, baik. Jadi yang menginspirasi saya Ida adalah keluarganya. Karena Ida datang dari unit keluarga yang merupakan dari keluarga yang seniman dan juga keluarga edukator. Ida menyebutkan ibunya adalah seorang putri, selalu ayahnya seorang edukator atau tenaga pendidikan. Dari sini Ida mendapatkan pengaruh yang luar biasa di mana keluarganya sangat terkenal dan mendukung cita-citanya dia untuk melakukan studi puisi seperti itu.
Okay, thank you, Ada. The next question is coming from Ruteng, from Faculty of Language and Arts, Sugija Pranato Catholic University. Said, I bring a troop of new students taking my Literature Matters class.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Please tell us why we as young people need to write poems, Ada.
Wonderful question. I think that writing poems not only helps us see the world more closely, but helps us tether ourselves to it and to remember that that connection to the world is what will keep us alive and what will keep us going. To feel not just that we are bodies moving through space, but that we're part of something. And when you write poems, you're writing yourself into the world. You're connecting yourself into the world. You're making a line from your body to whatever it is you're writing, whether it's the tree, whether it's your mother, whether it's your love, whatever it is. So it's about connecting yourself to the wider, greater universe.
Ya, menurut Ada, melalui seni berpuisi, kita bisa melihat dunia dengan lebih dekat, dengan jarak yang lebih dekat, dan juga yang lebih penting melihat koneksi kita sebagai manusia terhadap dunia. Bahwa kita adalah bagian dari sesuatu yang lebih besar daripada kita, dan juga dari situ dia membuat garis lurus terhadap bagaimana dia melihat dirinya dan juga alam di sekitar dia.
Thank you, Rain.
Yeah, beautiful. So another beautiful question, Ada. It's from Stefania Siska. She's from Universitas Lambung Mangkurat. The question is, what makes a poem a good one? Must it touch people's heart? Or it's simply because we want to express our feelings from it and hoping that it will be touching people's heart?
Oh, that's a big question. What makes a poem a good one?
Right.
For me, I think there's three things that make a poem satisfying in my own heart. And it's the combination of the sound, right? The ear, the sense, right? So that it's feeling like it's actually moving in something, right? The senses. And then the story, so that there has to be something, and I don't mean it has to be narrative, but I think that it has to somehow transform from one thing to another. And when you have those three elements all working together, then the poem can feel satisfying. And it doesn't always necessarily have to touch people's hearts, but I think what it needs to do is activate a sort of aliveness in us.
Menurut Ada, ada 3 hal atau 3 kriteria yang menurut Ada menjadikan sebuah karya puisi itu memuaskan. Nomor 1, bunyi. Nomor 2, indera atau rasa. Jadi indera atau rasa. Lalu yang ketiga, cerita. Namun yang dia maksud dengan cerita di sini bukan hanya naratif, tapi kemampuan dari kombinasi 3 hal ini untuk mentransformasi satu hal kecil menjadi sebuah hal yang lebih besar, dan ketika hal tersebut bekerja bersama, itu akan memberikan rasa yang paling memuaskan. Jadi tidak selalu serta-merta selalu harus menyentuh hati, tapi juga berbagai rasa indah lainnya.
Thank you.
Okay. Ada, still related to that, in your creative work process, were you planning it to be? I mean, are you do the outline first before you jump up into finding the vocabulary or dictions that is you want? Yeah.
No, I don't. It's always a mystery to me where I begin. I usually begin with a question, an interrogation, something I want to hold up to the light and figure out why it interests me. And I turn it around and around and around, and I go, oh, I think there might be something there. And that's where I begin, is that sort of curiosity. And then from there, in the revision process, I'll go back and make sure that the sounds are really working. I'll make sure that the sentence structure, the syntax, the line breaks, the rhythm, all of that is really working to make the poem feel like it's pulsating.
Right.
Jawabannya tidak, saya tidak pernah punya rencana, justru dia membiarkan semua proses ini menjadi sebuah misteri bagi Ada. Dan biasanya Ada akan memulai proses ini dengan sebuah pertanyaan, dan dimulai dari sana ini seperti proses interogasi. Mungkin dari sana akan ada hal yang menarik, namun yang paling penting adalah memiliki rasa penasaran untuk mengeksplorasi rasa penasaran tersebut. Lalu ketika Ada memasuki tahapan revisi, dari situ ia akan melihat ulang apakah hal-hal yang sudah dituliskan itu masuk akal atau tidak secara teknis.
Right.
Thank you,
Ada. The next question, Ada, it's from Deva. He said, maybe I'm not going to become a poet, but you do have a great speaking skill by becoming a poet. So would you mind telling us how to improve it?
I think the best way that I know how to become or how to make your poems better, stronger, is always asking yourself, is it true to you? And I feel like that question sounds vague, but I really think it's important to keep asking and keep interrogating yourself. Is this poem true? Is it true to how I feel?
Right.
Because so easily we switch into the idea of performance for someone else, or performance for ourselves, or we make a poem that we think, it looks like a poem, so it's a poem. But we really need to get to the core of it. Why does it matter? Why is it important? Is it true? And I think if you can keep asking yourself that, your poems will just get better and stronger and more powerful and more important to you.
Ya, menurut Ada, cara terbaik membuat puisi yang menurut dia kuat adalah memulai dengan pertanyaan, apakah ini benar untuk kita? Memang rasanya pertanyaan ini agak mengawang-awang. Namun proses ini sangat penting supaya apa yang tertulis di puisi adalah benar-benar curahan dari perasaan kita sendiri. Jangan sampai puisi yang kita ciptakan itu menjadi terjebak semacam sebuah pertunjukan. Puisi yang baik adalah puisi yang mampu mengangkat kenapa ini penting untuk kita. Dan teruslah bereksplorasi tentang pertanyaan itu. Teruslah bertanya kepada diri kita, kenapa ini penting? Karena semakin kita menuju ke arah sana, semakin kita tahu bahwa puisi yang kita tulis akan menjadi puisi yang benar-benar kuat. Karena itu sangat dekat dengan kita.
Thank you, Rain. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Yeah, that's okay. So keep asking yourself is one of the tools of the good poet. Okay. The next question, Ada, it's from Abu. How to find an image out of everyday things to create a powerful narrative, especially in autobiographical poems. I was particularly interested in some images in which you mocked male superiority. And I was thinking of Lady Horse, the bitch, aka a girl pit bull, in one of your poems, and the most startling of all, Carrot. So the first two images are, of course, witty, erotic, and thrilling all at once. And then those poor carrots. I was like, so bright that things are carrots? I'm aware that the carrots are an entry point to a larger theme, but still, how did you pull it off? So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, thank you, first of all. That's a wonderful compliment. I think partly, I'll admit that some of that image work is my personality.
Right.
Itu adalah bagian saya sendiri.
Because I feel, this is going to sound strange, but that I am really attuned to the weirdness of the world, the wonder of it. Everything to me feels strange and connected and illuminated, which can be a good and a hard way to live sometimes.
Ini terasa aneh, namun saya merasa bisa terhubung terhadap rasa keanehan tapi juga keajaiban itu. Karena menurut saya dunia itu memang aneh, namun terkoneksi dan juga teriluminasi.
So when I talked about the carrots, I remember the guilt I had for pulling them up too soon and how I had ruined the crop. And even as a child, they were so beautiful, but I realized that I had wrecked them, and it always stuck with me. So those small images are always burned into my heart.
Jadi ketika saya berpikir atau berimajinasi tentang wortel, yang saya asosiasikan adalah rasa bersalah. Karena ini dimulai ketika masa kecil saya mencabut wortel terlalu awal dari masa panennya, sehingga saya merasa bersalah karena saya merusak masa panennya. Dari situ saya mulai merasa bahwa banyak hal-hal kecil yang bisa memberikan inspirasi.
Thank you, Rain. Are you back?
Arlene?
Oh no, we lost her again.
Check.
Well, while we wait for her, I'll elaborate a little bit more on that answer. Okay. You're back.
Hello, check. Sorry for the internet connection.
No problem.
I got some trouble here, but
It
hopefully
happens to all of us.
everything okay. Okay, thank you, Ada. Yeah. Hopefully I didn't miss a lot.
Can you hear us?
Yes, now.
Okay. Yeah, no, you didn't miss too much.
Okay. Please allow me to turn off my video. Based on experience, it will help with the connection.
Yeah,
So it's
that's
kind
smart.
of windy here in Momiri. Okay.
That's smart.
Thank you. Can we continue now? So you finished with the questions?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry that I missed that.
That's okay.
All right. So the second question is still from Abu, Ada. It's a bit political, he said. So last week, Abu joined an online event, Counselor Conversation, Poetry and Social Change, hosted by Tracy K. Smith. And he got the impression that what makes contemporary American poetry so fascinating is its the diversity. Its advocacy to celebrating diverse voices. But there is this poem of yours, the contract says, we'd like the conversation to be bilingual, that plays with or problematize the notion of political representations. The opening line is quite ironic. When you came, bring your brownness, so we can be sure to please the funders.
Mhm.
Can we draw a line between tokenism and inclusion? That's the questions.
That's a wonderful question. And I think it's really hard to answer that, but I think we need to be aware that we have to make sure that we're inclusive, right? We have to make sure that we are, or when we're putting together an event, a panel, that with our poetic community, which is incredibly diverse.
Mhm.
But I think we also have to make sure
Mhm.
that we are not choosing people whose work we don't even know, but we're only doing it because they sort of fit the category that we need, right? To fill out our
Mhm. Mhm.
our panel. And I think that's really important, that we make it about the work, and that we also make sure that if we're including someone, we're including them because we know their work,
Mhm.
we appreciate their work, we value them as humans, not because someone
Mhm.
told us
Mhm.
that we needed to do X, Y, and Z to get a grant or to get approved by the AWP panel committee, etc.
Ya, menurut Ada ini sangat susah dijawab, namun kesadaran bahwa kita harus berusaha untuk menjadi inklusif itu perlu ada. Contohnya ketika kita melaksanakan sebuah kegiatan atau acara di mana ada sekumpulan panelis, kita bisa memastikan bahwa ada representasi yang adil atau berimbang dari komunitas pembaca puisi atau komunitas penggiat puisi. Dan diusahakan bahwa kita jangan hanya sekedar memilih representasi tersebut hanya karena unsur representasinya. Tapi kita harus juga mengerti karya-karya yang telah dihasilkan oleh penulis-penulis tersebut yang telah kita pilih. Jadi Ada mau menekankan bahwa representasi bukan hanya dalam sifat fisikal atau apa yang bisa dilihat, tapi juga karya-karya yang diciptakan. Sehingga jadi ini bukan hanya sebagai formalitas untuk misalnya mendaftar hibah atau misalnya dana-dana dari pemerintah, seperti itu.
Thank you, Rain.
So it's interesting to be political in poetry, right?
Mhm.
Thank you for stating that, Ada.
Of course. I mean, it's part of our world. I think it's a really important topic because I think oftentimes too, we forget in our own work. We have to remember, I think, even as writers, that we get to write about whatever we want, because sometimes being a writer of color, what is celebrated is only poems about identity or only poems about suffering, etc.
Right.
And so we have to be sure as writers of color that we keep pushing the boundaries to make sure that we're allowed to write about whatever we want to write about. And if we want to write about a poem about a tree or a poem about love that doesn't mention our skin tone, that's okay. Like, that should be embraced. We should have permission to have all the subjects open to us.
Ya, ini bisa menjadi sebuah renungan khususnya untuk penulis-penulis atau penyair-penyair kulit berwarna, karena biasanya diasosiasikan atau stereotipnya adalah penulis-penulis kulit berwarna hanya menulis topik-topik seputar identitas ataupun penderitaan ataupun penindasan. Seharusnya penulis-penulis kulit berwarna itu bisa mendorong batasan tersebut. Jadi bisa menulis tentang apapun yang kita mau, seperti misalnya pohon, rasa kasih sayang, dan mungkin tidak menulis tentang warna kulit kita.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ada. So more questions are coming because I believe everyone is waiting for it. We will jump up to the next questions. It's from Damianus. The question is, if we are faced with a situation where the younger generation and many adults are not at all interested in poetry, how to act then? Interesting.
I think it's okay not to be interested in poetry.
Okay. Oh.
Kalau misalnya tidak syair atau puisi,
no art form can reach everyone.
tidak ada satu bentuk karya seni yang bisa menyentuh semua lapisan masyarakat.
But I do think as poets, the big move we can make is to make sure we're writing poetry for everyone.
Right.
Or writing poetry to connect versus writing poetry to prove how smart we are.
Sebagai penulis atau sebagai penyair, sangat penting bagi kita untuk menulis dengan landasan untuk berkoneksi atau menjalin hubungan dengan orang lain, bukan dengan alasan bahwa kita ingin membuktikan betapa pintar kita.
Okay, so the intention matters, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ada. This is the next questions coming from Beverly, the journalist of one of our online portal here in Flores. The question is, what is your first poet that you created or you wrote, and which one is the very first time that you published? And then the next one is, who was the person that encouraged you for the first time to publish your poem?
Yeah. I actually published my first poem at 15 in a small journal that was in my community.
Wow, okay.
Saya sesungguhnya pertama kali mempublikasikan karya puisi saya ketika saya berusia 15 tahun di jurnal kecil di komunitas di mana Ada berada.
And my stepfather and my mother were the first two people to encourage me to submit my poems to that small journal.
Dan Ada berkata bahwa ayah tiri dan juga ibu kandungnya adalah dua orang pertama yang menghimbau Ada, menganjurkan Ada untuk mendaftarkan puisinya terhadap jurnal tersebut.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ada. The last question still from, the last question from Beverly. Is there any poem that will be your most favorite? And why is it for you?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Tough questions, I know.
I think it depends on how I'm feeling in the moment.
Perasaan Ada saat ini atau dalam saat-saat tertentu.
There are poems that I'm very attached to because I need them at that time. So I don't think I have a favorite. I think that like most artists, whatever I'm working on in the moment at that time is the most exciting thing. So I'm very attached to my new work is usually how my brain works. But I don't have a favorite. No, they're all my babies.
Ya, Ada menambahkan bahwa sebenarnya dia sama sekali tidak punya karya favorit, namun biasanya polanya adalah Ada merasa sangat terikat terhadap puisi-puisi yang dia rasa dia butuhkan, tergantung konteks waktu saat itu. Tapi seperti artis kebanyakan, biasanya karya-karya yang sedang dia kerjakan pada saat tertentu menjadi hal yang mungkin menjadi puisi yang membuat dia sangat tertarik atau dia sangat semangat.
So it means that your point is not only moving your readers, but yourself as the writers. It's incredible. Thank you, Ada. The next question is from Mario Lawi. He's one of the poet that we have nationally. The questions is, during the impossible age of everyone from bright dead things, that poem reminds him of another poems, especially of some of the Virgil's eclogues and of Robert Frost's poems.
Mm-hmm.
So for Mario, that poem is a pastoral one because it explores the relationship between human and nature, and at the same time romanticizing the ideals of a simple country life. If you don't mind telling us, what is the most essential facet you draw from pastoral poetry tradition?
That's a wonderful question. I think the most essential part of the pastoral tradition that I draw from is that sense of wonder. That even though there has been many people who have lived before us, that there is wonder in the idea that we're doing it now for the first time.
Ada merasa bahwa hal yang paling esensial dalam hal misalnya tradisi puisi, penulisan puisi dengan gaya pastoral adalah terdapat sensasi atau rasa takjub, bahwa meskipun ini sudah dilakukan berkali-kali, tapi itu merupakan hal yang sangat menakjubkan karena dia harus melakukannya itu untuk pertama kalinya.
Thank you.
All right. Hopefully you don't mind if we do some flashback from the previous questions. It's from Damianus. It's about what should we do when people do not care about poetry? What does he means is, what is the practical actions that we can do when our surroundings are not interested in poetry? Just because, but in case that, as you said before, that poetry is actually is powerful and also is a great tool for us to deliver our voices as well as to heal and to touch people's heart.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that people come to poetry in different ways. So that oftentimes poetry needs to be heard.
Right.
So if you give someone a page and they don't relate to it, it's because they need to hear it. So you may need to say, oh, like, I want to read this to you. Let's like perform this. Let's hear it.
Right.
So it's in the senses. I think that's a big part of it. I also think that if someone's resisting a certain poem, move on, go to another poem. There's so many poems to choose from that I think we have to provide access to lots of different voices and lots of different poems so that they don't think that it's only Robert Frost or Walt Whitman, right? But that you also have all of these other writers out there writing so many different things, so that as a young person, you can kind of enter through different pathways.
Oke. Bahwa penting untuk mengingat bahwa setiap individu mempunyai cara yang berbeda untuk mengeksplorasi atau misalnya datang atau menyukai puisi untuk pertama kalinya. Yang pertama, Ada menyarankan bahwa puisi itu harus dilafalkan, harus diperdengarkan, atau harus dibacakan. Jadi mungkin tidak cukup hanya untuk ditunjukkan atau misalnya dibacakan saja. Puisi harus didengarkan. Yang kedua, apabila terdapat resistensi atau penolakan, berpindahlah, eksplorasi lebih banyak puisi atau hasil-hasil karya lainnya. Mungkin ada banyak jenis karya-karya puisi yang bisa diperdengarkan. Misalnya, kalau Rob Frost atau Walt Whitman tidak berhasil, mungkin bisa mencoba karya-karya lain.
Thank you, Rain.
So it means that every single poet can be adjusted to every single personality as well, based on
Yes.
our needs, right, Ada? Yeah.
Yes.
Another question is asking for your tips on how to create a poem in which the words are so beautiful that they can touch the reader and many people. How you make the poem's ideas just flow, and it means the choice of words so that the poem looks very beautiful.
I think the big part of it is to make sure that you're reading it out loud.
Right.
Because you must have the sonic element to feel the word's power, right? Beauty in poetry doesn't always come from the images, but a lot of it comes from the ear.
Okay.
Ada merasa bahwa hal yang terpenting adalah memastikan bahwa hasil karya puisi tersebut dibacakan dengan lantang atau dengan keras misalnya. Karena hasil karya puisi itu secara unik adalah elemen sonik atau elemen suara. Bahwa yang berpengaruh sangat besar adalah the power atau kekuatan kata-kata tersebut. Jadi bukan hanya kekuatan dari imagery ataupun penampakan ataupun visualisasi dari kata-kata yang digunakan di dalam puisi atau sajak.
Thank you.
Right. So this is another question, Ada, still related to the previous one, I guess. It's from Ekawati. She's asking, what is your most favorite element to write your poetry with? Would it be using metaphors, hyperbole, or idioms, or combinations of many things? And what would be your suggestions for poetry students who may like or may not like writing poems, meaning they write poetry because they study at an English department?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think my favorite two things would be sound and metaphor. So I love sound, but I love metaphor.
Dua elemen favoritnya Ada adalah bunyi dan juga metafora. You may continue.
And then for me, trying to get poetry students to want to write poetry, I think it's about giving them permission to write about really simple things, that it doesn't have to be the big ticket items of our lives. We don't have to say, write about the hardest thing that ever happened to you. But we can start very simple. And if you want to write, I know with students who are young, you can say, you can write about your video game, you can write about your Facebook, or you can write whatever it is that they're interested in, TikTok. Like, they can start to write poems that are in their world, right? Not in the adult world. And I think that's really important.
Ya, mungkin sedikit taktik atau strategi dari Ada adalah sebagai guru atau fasilitator, kita bisa memfasilitasi siswa-siswa muda ini yang tertarik untuk menulis puisi untuk memulai dari hal yang sangat sederhana. Karena kadang kita terjebak untuk memulai menuliskan apa hal yang terberat yang pernah kita lakukan. Namun di sini Ada memberikan perspektif bahwa untuk siswa-siswa muda khususnya, mereka bisa mulai dari hal yang sangat mudah seperti misalnya video game, Facebook atau TikTok, apapun yang ada atau apapun yang sekarang ada di dunia mereka. Jadi dari situ dia bisa memulai mengetahui bahwa dunia anak-anak sebenarnya sangat dekat dengan mereka. Jadi mereka bisa menulis puisi tentang dunia mereka, bukan dunia orang dewasa.
Okay. So meaning that study about poetry is not necessarily to be a poet, right? But we learn from poetry, from poems, right? Thank you, Ada. I noticed that we still less than 10 minutes now. If we still have questions, if not, or still waiting for the last questions before we close the session, would you like to read us the third works that you prepare, Ada?
Yes, I'd be honored. This is a poem that I wrote at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think I was struggling with the idea of poetic subjects, and that poetry wasn't helping me. And it usually does. So what do we do when poetry fails us as a poet? We write a poem about it.
Right.
The end of poetry. Enough of osseous and chickadee and sunflower and snowshoes, maple and seeds, samara and shoot. Enough chiaroscuro, enough of thus and prophecy, and the stoic farmer and faith and our Father and 'tis of thee. Enough of bosom and bud, skin and God not forgetting, and star bodies and frozen birds. Enough of the will to go on and not go on, or how a certain light does a certain thing. Enough of the kneeling and the rising and the looking inward and the looking up. Enough of the gun, the drama, the acquaintance's suicide, the long lost letter on the dresser. Enough of the longing and the ego and the obliteration of ego. Enough of the mother and the child and the father and the child. And enough of pointing to the world, weary and desperate. Enough of the brutal and the border. Enough of, can you see me? Can you hear me? Enough, I am human. Enough, I am alone and I am desperate. Enough of the animal saving me. Enough of the high water. Enough sorrow. Enough of the air and its ease. I am asking you to touch me.
Wow. Thank you, Ada. Oh, that's so beautiful and intense at the same time, again and again. So, guys, that's why you should go and explore how not only read the Ada's work in writing form, but also to hear the sounds. I think that's really beautiful. Thank you, Ada, for that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, do we still have around 5 minutes or less? I noticed that no questions are coming still now. So, okay, Ada, would you mind to share maybe your closing statement or your messages that you can share with us, especially in the context of us, in how to appreciate the beauty of the poetry itself and how to explore ourselves to be not to be necessarily to be a professional poets like you are, but at least we can learn from any starting point that we have.
Yeah. I think the important thing to remember is that poetry comes in all forms. We can write poetry for ourselves. We can write poetry to a lover, to a friend. But it doesn't always have to do one thing. It can do many things.
Right.
And I also think it's important to remember that as we move forward in our poetic community, that poems travel one poem at a time. There's a lot of pressure to like make a collection or to publish a lot, but it's all about just making one poem at a time. That's what we do. We don't write books. Books get made, but we write one poem at a time, and that's where it begins. That's what we can put in a letter. You may not publish, but maybe you write a handwritten poem and you send it to someone. That in and of itself is incredibly valuable. It's connection. It's creating community with our words.
Ya, hal penting untuk diingat bahwa nomor satu, bahwa poetry atau puisi datang dalam berbagai bentuk atau format. Bisa dari diri kita sendiri, pacar, orang terdekat, atau teman-teman kita. Jadi puisi bukan hanya satu hal, tapi itu bisa menyangkut atau mencakupi banyak hal. Lalu yang kedua, Ada menyarankan bahwa satu puisi untuk satu waktu. Karena puisi itu bisa pergi dari satu tempat ke satu tempat yang lainnya dengan sangat cepat. Jangan terburu-buru untuk membuat koleksi atau ontologi dari puisi. Mungkin bisa memulai dari hal kecil, mulai dari kegiatan surat menyurat, misalnya membuat puisi kecil yang mungkin tidak akan dipublikasi. Dengan demikian kita bisa menjalin koneksi melalui puisi.
Thank you. And if I can say one more thing, I would just add that we don't need to put so much pressure on ourselves to make the best poem, right? To make the most amazing poem that ever existed. That it can just be a simple act of letting the world know that we're here. And that's enough. That it can be sort of evidence of our life. And that's enough.
Oke. Satu pesan lagi dari Ada, bahwa jangan menciptakan tekanan-tekanan terhadap diri kita sendiri, bahwa kita harus membuat puisi terbaik di seluruh dunia. Ini bisa dimulai dari hal yang sangat sederhana. Dengan cara menuliskan bahwa siapa kita, dengan cara memberitahukan kepada dunia bahwa kita ada di sini, dan itu akan menjadi bukti bahwa kita pernah ada di dunia ini.
Thank you, Rain.
Wow. Thank you, Ada. So, unfortunately, now we are coming to the end of the session. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Ada, for coming here online and meeting us. It's been very insightful. I think we need to, that's why it's fortunately because we need to have some more time to absorb this beauty of the conversations. And hopefully you can also still be in touch with us here. And we are looking forward to hear from you, especially the next book.
Thank you so much. And I hope I can be there in person someday soon.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ada. Right, so thank you for everyone. I will give back the stage to the MC, Kak Erma.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Terima kasih, Mbak Erlin. Thank you, Ada. It's such a great session. Thank you for sharing with us. Saya rasa sekarang masih ada pembacaan 2 karya dari teman-teman di NTT. Saya langsung persilahkan ya, apakah sudah siap? Silahkan di-on-kan kameranya. Margareta.
Thank you.
Oke, selamat malam. Apakah suara saya terdengar dengan jelas?
Jelas, Kak Reta.
Oke. Baik, terima kasih untuk kesempatan luar biasa ini. Saya Reta, saya dari Klub Buku Petra Ruteng. Malam ini saya akan membacakan satu buah puisi. Sebelum saya membaca, mungkin saya akan bercerita sedikit. Beberapa tahun lalu saya membaca beberapa buku puisi, begitu. Lalu setelah membaca buku-buku itu, saya terlalu amat bersemangat untuk menulis puisi, seperti itu. Kemudian beberapa tahun setelahnya saya menemukan bahwa saya bukan penulis puisi, tetapi beberapa puisi yang saya baca pada akhirnya membantu saya untuk menemukan diri saya yang lain dan semakin mengenal diri saya. Salah satu puisi yang tidak sengaja saya baca adalah puisi yang akan saya bacakan malam ini. Puisi ini judulnya Pengungsi, ditulis oleh Dimas Immanuel, dan puisi ini bersama puisi-puisi lainnya masuk dalam buku puisinya yang berjudul Karena Cinta Kuat Seperti Maut. Seperti itu. Saya akan baca puisi ini. pengungsi. Aku ingin mencintaimu dan tinggal lebih lama. Tapi dendam, kesedihan, dan keterasingan adalah badai yang tak bisa kuredakan. Wangi anggur, harum roti, hangat perapian, dan liar percintaan tak sekalipun menenangkan. Aku ingin mencintaimu dan tinggal lebih lama. Tapi matahari di negerimu terlalu terik dan pikiranku mudah meranggas. Aku tak akan membiarkanmu melihat cabang-cabangku terulur ke langit seperti tangan seorang pendosa yang putus asa. Aku ingin mencintaimu dan tinggal lebih lama. Tapi aku hanya punya sebuah koper untuk mengepak diriku jika sewaktu-waktu aku harus pergi. Tidak ada ruang untuk melarikanmu. Tidak ada ruang untuk lari darimu. Kelak, aku pun harus pergi karena kebahagiaan itu seperti wabah dan tubuhku tidak mungkin tabah menanggungnya. Aku hanyalah pengungsi abadi dari negeri yang selamanya bertikai, diriku sendiri. Terima kasih, sekian. Kak Erlin, terima kasih banyak. Teman-teman, terima kasih banyak. Salam dari Ruteng.
Terima kasih Margareta.
Ya, siap.
Selanjutnya saya persilahkan Marianus Nua.
Halo, selamat malam. Nama saya Marianus. Saya dari Flores, dari Maumere. Saya akan membacakan salah satu puisi yang ditulis oleh almarhum Gunawan Marianto. Selamat mendengarkan. Di sini gerah, daun diam, dan angin mati. Tubuhku berkeringat, mengingat ciuman-ciuman kita yang singkat. Urat-uratku menggeliat, menghadirkan bau lehermu yang pekat. Semalam, telah kutuang arak pada tanah. Basah, memanggil namamu. Tentu, kau tak mendengarnya. Seorang pemabuk hanya mendengar suaranya sendiri. Sakuntala, Sakuntala. Gunawan Marianto, Sakuntala. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Marianus Nua. Baik teman-teman, saya rasa kita sudah tiba di penghujung acara dan sayang sekali Ada harus left terlebih dahulu. Terima kasih sekali lagi, terima kasih Mbak Erlin atas kesempatannya di malam hari ini. Terima kasih teman-teman di Ruteng, teman-teman juga di Universitas Sugija Pranata dan Lambung Mangkurat. Besok kita masih ada satu sesi lagi, sesi terakhir dari Satelit Event, jam 7 WITA, melalui YouTube, IG, dan Facebook Live WRF, itu bersama Vincent Bevins. Jadi untuk teman-teman yang masih ingin bergabung, besok bisa bergabung langsung. Dan juga untuk informasi lebih lanjut, bisa melalui sosial media kami di Facebook, Twitter, atau Instagram @Flores Writers Festival. Dan silahkan sharing juga di sana tentang pengalaman teman-teman mengikuti Satelit Event ini. Sekali lagi, Saya atas nama Yayasan Saraswati dan Ubud Writers mengucapkan terima kasih kepada teman-teman semua sudah bergabung malam ini. Saya akhiri diskusi kita malam ini. Sampai jumpa besok.